The stars looked different through alien windows. Jake Martinez pressed his face against the clear metal surface and watched Earth shrink behind them. 3 days ago, he had been eating breakfast in his apartment in Houston. Now he was flying through space in a ship built by creatures he had only dreamed about. The ship was called Harmony's Edge, and it belonged to something called the Galactic Coalition. Jake still could not believe any of this was real. Aliens were real. They had been watching Earth for years, and now they wanted to talk. Jake was not alone on the alien ship. Dr. Lisa Park stood next to him, taking notes on everything she saw. She was a scientist who studied animals, but now she was studying aliens instead. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Brooks sat in the corner, checking his weapon for the 10th time. He did not trust aliens, even friendly ones. Amy Chun was talking into her radio, trying to keep contact with Earth. The aliens called themselves the Corvani. They looked like tall, thin people with blue skin and large black eyes. Their leader was Captain Vextar. He spoke English very well, though his voice sounded like music. "Your species fascinates us," Captain Vextar said to Jake. "We have watched your television signals for many years. You seem to fight each other often." Jake nodded. "We have wars, yes, but we also have peace. We are trying to be better." "That is good to hear," the alien captain said. "War is wasteful. The Coalition believes in solving problems with words, not weapons." Dr. Park looked up from her notes. "How many species are in your coalition?" 47, Captain Vextar replied. "We are all peaceful races. We explore space together. We share knowledge. We help each other." The ship's bridge was huge and filled with aliens. Some looked like the Corvani, with blue skin and big eyes. Others were completely different. The Ashkari looked like walking crystals that sparkled when they moved. The Threnody wore special suits filled with water because they came from ocean planets. "Earth would be welcome in the Coalition," Captain Vextar continued. "But first, we must understand your people better. Your broadcasts show much violence. Are all humans warriors?" Ryan Brooks spoke up. "We fight when we have to. But most of us just want to live in peace." "That is what we hope to hear," the alien captain said. "War brings only suffering. Smart species learn to avoid it." Jake looked around the bridge. Everything was clean and bright. The aliens moved slowly and spoke softly. They seemed gentle, almost fragile. He wondered what they would think if they really knew about human history. Earth had seen thousands of wars. Humans had been fighting since they lived in caves. An alarm suddenly filled the air. Red lights flashed everywhere. The aliens began moving quickly, but they still seemed calm. "What is happening?" Jake asked. Captain Vextar touched a panel, and a screen appeared in the air. It showed space around them. Dark ships were approaching fast. They were black and covered in sharp points. They looked like weapons built to fly. "Scarn Empire," the alien captain said. His voice was tight with fear. "They are slavers and killers. They must have followed us." "How many ships?" Ryan asked, moving closer to the screen. 12 battle cruisers," an Askari officer replied. The crystal being's voice sounded like breaking glass. "We have only 6 ships in our convoy. Can we fight them?" Jake asked. The aliens looked shocked. Captain Vextar stared at Jake like he had said something terrible. "Fight? No, we will retreat. The Coalition does not fight unless there is no other choice. We will return to Coalition space and request a military escort." "What about the peace talks?" Dr. Park asked. "We will reschedule. Your safety is more important than meetings." The Scarn ships were getting closer. On the screen, Jake could see they were massive. Each one was twice the size of the Coalition ships. They bristled with weapons. "Coalition vessels," a harsh voice filled the bridge. "You carry new meat for the Empire. Surrender the aliens from the primitive world." We will make their deaths quick. Captain Vextar turned to Jake. I am sorry. We must run. The Coalition will not risk war for first contact. Run? Ryan said. You are just going to leave? It is the smart choice, the alien captain replied. We cannot win this fight. Better to live and try again later. Jake felt something hot in his chest. These aliens had come to Earth in peace. They had offered friendship and knowledge. Now they were under attack because of humans, and the Coalition wanted to run away. No, Jake said. I beg your pardon? Captain Vextar asked. I said no, we are not running. The bridge went quiet. All the aliens stared at Jake. Even his own people looked surprised. Commander Martinez, Captain Vextar said carefully. I understand you are upset, but this is not your choice to make. We are in Coalition space on Coalition ships. Then let us off. What? Let us off your ship? Give us a shuttle or something. You can run if you want. But we did not come this far to turn around at the first sign of trouble. Dr. Park stepped forward. Jake, what are you doing? This is crazy, is it? Jake turned to look at his team. These aliens came to Earth in peace. They offered us friendship. Now they are in danger because of us. And we are supposed to just let them run away? It is not logical to fight when you cannot win. Captain Vextar said. Jake smiled, but it was not a happy smile. Captain, with respect, you do not know humans very well. We do not always do what is logical. The Scarn ships opened fire. The Scarn plasma bolts hit the Coalition ships like hammers. The alien vessels shook and sparks flew from their control panels. Captain Vextar gripped his chair as another blast rocked the bridge. Shields at 60%, an officer called out. Hull breach on Deck 7. Begin retreat pattern Alpha, Captain Vextar ordered. All ships, fall back to the jump point. The Coalition ship started to turn away from the attacking Scarn fleet. This was how space battles worked in civilized space. When you were outnumbered, you retreated. When casualties got too high, you surrendered. It was logical. It saved lives, but the human ship did not turn away. Captain Nick Thompson stood on the bridge of the Defiant Spirit, watching the alien ships flee. His ship was small compared to the Coalition vessels. It carried only 50 crew members. But it was built for war, not exploration. Sir, his weapons officer said, the aliens are retreating. Should we follow them? No, Nick said. We stay. Sir, we are outnumbered 12-1. Nick smiled. Then it is a fair fight. The Defiant Spirit turned toward the Scarn fleet. Its engines burned bright blue as it accelerated into the enemy formation. The move was so unexpected that the Scarn ships hesitated for a moment. On the Coalition flagship, Science Officer Kellith watched the human ships approach with growing alarm. Captain, the human vessel is not retreating. It appears to be attacking. Captain Vextar looked at the screen in disbelief. That is impossible. They cannot win. Why would they throw their lives away? Back on the Defiant Spirit, Sergeant. Major Tony Rodriguez was suiting up for battle. His Marines were checking their weapons and putting on their armor. They had trained for this moment their whole lives. Listen up, Tony called to his men. We got 12 enemy ships full of slavers who want to hurt our new alien friends. We got 1 ship and 50 Marines. Anyone see a problem with this? The Marines laughed. They did not see a problem. They saw an opportunity. Our job is simple, Tony continued. We board their ships, we break their stuff. We make them sorry they ever heard of humans. Questions? A young Marine raised his hand. Sergeant Major, what if we die? Tony grinned. Then we die fighting. Better than dying in bed. The Marines cheered. They were not afraid of dying. They were afraid of not fighting hard enough. Dr. Lisa Park was trapped on the Coalition ship with Jake Martinez and the others. She watched the human ship charge into battle through the alien sensors. What she saw made no sense. The Defiant Spirit was taking massive damage. Its shields were down. Its hull was cracked, but it kept fighting. It kept moving forward. "Why do they not retreat?" Captain Vextar asked. "They are clearly losing." Dr. Park started taking notes. As a scientist, she wanted to understand what was happening. "Captain, I think you are missing something. They are not trying to win. They are trying to hurt the enemy as much as possible before they die. That is ... insane." "No," Dr. Park said. "Slowly, that is human." The Defiant Spirit crashed into the side of a Scarn battleship. The impact tore both ships apart. But as the human ship died, its crew kept fighting. They fired every weapon they had. They launched every missile. They used the ship itself as a weapon. Tony Rodriguez and his Marines had already boarded the Scarn flagship using emergency pods. They burst through the enemy hull wearing simple spacesuits and carrying whatever weapons they could find. The Scarn were not prepared for this. In their experience, boarding parties were careful. They used proper equipment. They had backup plans. They retreated when things went wrong. The humans had no backup plan. They had no retreat route. They just kept moving forward. Tony kicked down a door and found himself facing 5 Scarn warriors. They were tall, with gray skin and sharp teeth. They carried energy weapons that could cut through steel. "Surrender, human," one of them said. "You are outnumbered." Tony looked at his men. They were outnumbered 20-1 on this ship. They were cut off from help. They were probably going to die. "You know what?" Tony said. "I do not think so." The fight that followed was brutal. The Scarn were bigger and stronger than humans. Their weapons were better. Their armor was thicker. But they had never fought anything like Tony Rodriguez and his Marines. When Tony's left arm was cut off by a plasma blast, he picked it up and used it to beat a Scarn warrior unconscious. When Private Danny Kim ran out of ammunition, he started throwing pieces of the ship at the enemy. When Corporal Sue Williams was shot in the chest, she kept fighting until she collapsed. The Scarn had rules for combat. When casualties reached 20%, units pulled back. When they reached 50%, they surrendered. It was efficient. It was logical. But the humans did not follow these rules. They fought harder when they were hurt. They became more dangerous when they were dying. Lieutenant Kevin Walsh was operating a weapons console even though the ship's medic said he should be dead. He had been shot 4 times and was losing blood fast, but he kept working. "Sir," a Scarn officer said to his captain, "the humans are not stopping. We have killed most of them, but the rest keep fighting." The Scarn captain looked at his reports. This was impossible. The humans should have surrendered by now. They should have seen that resistance was hopeless, but they did not surrender. They did not stop. They just kept fighting on the coalition ships. The aliens watched in horror and amazement as the humans tore through the Scarn fleet. The humans were losing, but they were taking the enemy with them. "Send a message to Coalition Command," Captain Vextar said quietly. "Tell them we have discovered something new about the humans." "What should I tell them, sir?" "Tell them the humans do not know how to quit." Admiral Zikmmer had conquered 17 different species in his long career. He knew how war worked. Every species had a breaking point. When they lost enough soldiers, they would surrender. When they faced certain death, they would beg for mercy. It was the natural way of things, but the humans were not natural. Zikmmer stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching reports flow in from across his fleet. The numbers made no sense. His tactical computer kept trying to calculate when the humans would surrender, but the machine could not find an answer. "Admiral," his aide said, "the humans on Ship 7 are still fighting. We have killed 80% of their boarding party." "And the rest?" "They are fighting harder than before, sir." Zikmmer's 4 eyes narrowed. This was impossible. No species fought harder when they were losing. It went against every law of survival he knew. On the lower decks of the Scarn flagship, Tony Rodriguez was still alive. Half his Marines were dead. The other half were wounded. But they had taken control of 3 decks and were moving toward the engine room. Tony was missing his left arm and had been shot twice, but he kept giving orders. Blood ran down his face from a head wound. His spacesuit was torn in 6 places. By all rights, he should have been dead an hour ago. "Sir," Private Danny Kim said, "I count 40 more Scarn between us and the engines." Tony looked around at his remaining men. There were 8 of them left. 8 Marines against 40 alien warriors. The smart thing would be to find a place to hide and wait for rescue. But rescue was not coming. The Defiant Spirit was destroyed. They were alone. "Well," Tony said, "at least the odds are getting better." The Marines laughed. They were exhausted, hurt, and outnumbered. But they were still laughing. Meanwhile, on another Scarn ship, Marine Captain Steve Jackson was leading his own assault. His unit had started with 20 men. Now he had 4 left, including himself. They had been cut off from the rest of the boarding party for 2 hours. The Scarn had offered them surrender terms 3 times. Each time, Steve had given them the same answer: "Come and take us." Steve's left leg was broken. Private Martinez had a hole in his chest big enough to put a fist through, but he was still carrying his rifle. Corporal Brown had been blinded by shrapnel, but he could still fight by sound. They had barricaded themselves in the ship's ammunition storage area. It was not a good position. They had no way out. The Scarn could just wait for them to bleed to death, but the humans were not waiting to die. "Captain," Private Martinez said, "I found something interesting in these weapon crates." Steve looked where Martinez was pointing. The crates were full of high explosive charges, enough to blow a hole in the ship's hull. "You thinking what I am?" "Thinking?" Steve asked. "Yes, sir. We cannot win this fight, but we can make sure they remember us." The 4 Marines began rigging the explosives. They worked slowly and carefully. They had been trained for this. Every human soldier learned how to destroy things when they could not hold them. Across the fleet, similar scenes were playing out. Humans who should have surrendered kept fighting. Humans who should have died kept moving. The Scarn had never seen anything like it. On the 3rd Scarn ship, Corporal Danny Kim found himself alone. His entire unit was dead. He was wounded in 7 places and had lost so much blood that he could barely stand. The Scarn had him surrounded. "Surrender, human," the Scarn commander said. "Your friends are dead. Your ship is destroyed. There is no point in dying." Danny looked around at the bodies of his fellow Marines. Good people, friends. They had come here to protect the aliens who had offered Earth friendship. Now they were dead. "You want to know the point?" Danny said. He was leaning against a wall, but his rifle was still in his hands. "The point is that you attacked peaceful people. The point is that you are bullies who hurt others because you can. You cannot win," the Scarn commander said. "Why do you not surrender?" Danny smiled. Blood ran from the corner of his mouth. "Because we are humans. We do not surrender. We do not quit. We fight until we cannot fight anymore. And then we find a way to keep fighting." The Scarn raised their weapons. There were 12 of them and 1 human. It should have been easy, but Danny Kim was not done fighting. He had 1 grenade left, 1 chance to hurt the enemy before he died. "Tell your people what happened here," Danny said. "Tell them about the humans who would not quit." The explosion killed everyone in the room. Back on the flagship, Admiral Zikmmer was getting reports from across his fleet. 3 of his ships were badly damaged. Hundreds of his warriors were dead, and all of this had been done by 50 humans. "Sir," his tactical officer said, "Ship 7 is requesting permission to retreat. The humans have taken the engine room. What? How many humans are left? 3, sir. 3 humans have taken control of an entire ship? Yes, sir. They are threatening to overload the reactor. Zikmmer could not believe what he was hearing. 3 humans were holding an entire Scarn warship. Hostage. It was impossible. It was insane, but it was happening. On Ship 7, Tony Rodriguez sat in the engine room with his 2 remaining Marines. They had rigged the reactor to explode if anyone tried to stop them. "This is Admiral Zikmmer," a voice said over the ships. "Communication system. Human warriors, you have fought well. We offer you terms. Surrender now, and we will treat you with honor." Tony looked at his men. They were barely alive, but they were still ready to fight. "Admiral," Tony said into the communicator, "I have a counteroffer. What do you want? You let the coalition ships go. All of them. Safe passage back to their space. And if we refuse?" Tony looked at the reactor controls. One button would turn this entire ship into a ball of fire. Then you learn what happens when you make humans angry. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Zikmmer felt something he had never experienced. Before, he felt fear. Not fear of death or pain, but fear of an enemy that would never stop fighting. The humans had no ships left. They were outnumbered 1,000 to 1. They were dying, but they were winning. The coalition ships had stopped running. They floated in space, watching something that should not have been possible. The Scarn fleet, the most feared military force in the galaxy, was retreating. Dr. Thay-Ren, the coalition's best expert on alien minds, sat in his laboratory reviewing the battle recordings. As a Corvani scientist, he had studied the behavior of 47 different species. He thought he understood how intelligent life worked, but the humans made no sense. "Computer," he said, "show me the human combat recordings again." The screen lit up with images of the battle. Dr. Thay-Ren watched human Marines fight with wounds that should have killed them. He saw them continue attacking when they were outnumbered 10 to 1. He watched them smile as they died. "Computer, analyze human casualty response patterns." Analysis complete. Human combat effectiveness increases by an average of 40% when casualty rates exceed 70%. This pattern is unprecedented in galactic military history. Dr. Thay-Ren stared at the data. Every other species became less effective as they took casualties. Fear, pain, and loss of numbers made them weaker, but humans became stronger. "Computer, compare human behavior to known berserker syndromes." Human combat behavior does not match standard berserker patterns. Subjects maintain tactical awareness and strategic thinking throughout engagement. Behavior appears to be controlled aggression rather than mindless rage. This was even more disturbing. The humans were not going crazy. They were making calm, rational decisions to fight until they died. On the coalition flagship, Captain Vextar was trying to contact Earth. The communication took several minutes to reach the human homeworld. When General Patricia Hayes appeared on the screen, she looked tired. "General Hayes," Captain Vextar said carefully, "we need to discuss your people's behavior in combat." "What about it?" "They appear to be malfunctioning. When faced with certain death, they continue fighting instead of surrendering. This is not normal behavior for intelligent species." General Hayes was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was hard. "Captain, let me be very clear about something. Our people are not malfunctioning. They are operating exactly as designed. I do not understand." "Captain, what do you know about Earth's history?" "We have monitored your broadcasts for decades. You have many wars. We have had thousands of wars. For millions of years, humans have been fighting. We fought animals that were bigger and stronger than us. We fought each other. We fought disease, starvation, and natural disasters. Do you know what happened to the humans who gave up when things got hard?" Captain Vextar was beginning to understand. They died. That's right. They died. The humans who survived were the ones who kept fighting. When everyone else quit. We are the children of people who never gave up. Dr. Thuren was listening to the conversation from his laboratory. He started pulling up files on human evolution. What he found made his blood run cold. Humans had evolved on a death world. Their planet was full of creatures that wanted to kill them. The weather tried to kill them. Even their own bodies tried to kill them with disease and age. But they had survived by refusing to quit. Computer, Dr. Thuren said, show me human cultural records. Focus on military traditions. The screen filled with human songs, stories, and sayings. Dr. Thuren read them with growing horror. Death before dishonor. Never give up, never surrender. Going down fighting. Taking them with you. These were not just words to humans. They were instructions for how to live. Back on the Coalition flagship, Jake Martinez was finally able to talk to Captain Vextar. Jake was wounded and tired, but he was alive. The Scarn had agreed to let the Coalition ships go in exchange for the human survivors. Commander Martinez, Captain Vextar said, your people's actions today were ... remarkable, but I must ask, why did you not surrender when the situation became hopeless? Jake looked at the alien captain with surprise. Because it was not hopeless. You lost your ship, most of your people died. How was that not hopeless? We accomplished our mission. What mission? You were supposed to be diplomats. Jake smiled. Our mission was to protect the Coalition ships and get them home safe. Mission accomplished. Captain Vextar stared at Jake. You call this a success? Your people are dead. They died doing their job. They died protecting friends. That is not failure, Captain. That is victory. Dr. Thuren entered the bridge carrying a data pad full of research. Captain, I need to speak with you privately. The two aliens moved to a corner of the bridge. Dr. Thuren's voice was urgent. Captain, we have made a terrible mistake. The humans are not like us. They are not like anyone we have ever met. What do you mean? They evolved differently. Most species develop intelligence to avoid conflict. Humans developed intelligence to be better at conflict. They are not peaceful explorers who sometimes fight. They are warriors who sometimes make peace. Captain Vextar looked back at Jake Martinez. The human was talking quietly with Dr. Park, planning their next diplomatic mission as if nothing had happened. Are you saying they are dangerous? I am saying they are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. But they are also the most valuable allies we could ever have. Why? Because they will never quit. No matter how bad things get, no matter how many of them die, they will never stop fighting for their friends. On the other side of the bridge, Dr. Lisa Park was taking notes on everything that had happened. As a scientist, she wanted to understand why the aliens seemed so shocked by human behavior. Jake, she said quietly, I think we scared them. Good, Jake replied. Fear breeds respect. And respect is the first step toward real friendship. Admiral Zikmmer's voice came over the communication system. Coalition vessels, this is Admiral Zikmmer. We are withdrawing from this sector. The humans have earned our respect. Captain Vextar opened the channel. Admiral, what about your original mission? Our mission was to capture new slaves, but slaves must be broken first. And we have learned today that humans cannot be broken. The Scarn fleet began to withdraw. For the first time in their history, they were retreating from a smaller force. Jake Martinez watched them go and made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. Captain Vextar, he said, I think it is time for Earth to join your coalition, but we need to discuss terms. What kind of terms? The kind that make sure this never happens to peaceful species again. Captain Vextar looked at the human commander. Jake Martinez had just watched most of his people die. He should have been broken, defeated, ready to go home. Instead, he was making plans to protect the galaxy. What are you suggesting, Commander? Jake smiled. I am suggesting that the Coalition needs a military. And I am suggesting that humans might be very good at that job. 6 months after the battle, the galaxy was a different place. The news of what humans had done to the Scarn Empire had spread to every world in Coalition space. Species that had lived in fear for generations suddenly had hope. Colonel Ryan Brooks stood in front of a classroom full of alien military officers. They had come from across the galaxy to learn about human combat methods. Ryan looked at his students, crystalline Ashkari, aquatic Threnody, tall Corvani, and dozens of other species. Welcome to the Human Combat Doctrine Institute, Ryan said. You are here because your governments want to understand how humans fight. But before we talk about tactics and weapons, you need to understand something important. A Threnody officer raised a tentacle. Colonel Brooks, our military analysts, say human combat behavior is suicidal. How can we learn from strategies that result in death? Ryan nodded. That is exactly the wrong question. You are thinking about this backwards. He touched a control, and a hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed the battle from 6 months ago. The aliens watched their own ships retreating while the human vessel charged into certain death. Most species fight to live, Ryan continued. Humans live to fight. That is the difference. When you fight to live, you have something to lose. When you live to fight, you have nothing to fear. An Ashkari officer's crystal body flickered with confusion. But Colonel, fear is what keeps us alive. Without fear, we make bad decisions. Fear keeps you safe, Ryan agreed. But safety is not the same thing as victory. Sometimes you have to choose between being safe and doing what is right. On the other side of the galaxy, the Scarn Empire was learning this lesson the hard way. Admiral Zikmmer sat in his command center, looking at reports from across Scarn space. For the first time in their history, other species were fighting. Back, the Grillix had always been peaceful traders. But after hearing about human tactics, they had started using suicide ships against Scarn raiders. The Elthari, who had been slaves for 50 years, were now blowing up Scarn factories with themselves inside. Admiral, his aide said, the rebellion on Kilo 7 has spread to 3 more worlds. The slaves are using human-style tactics. Zikmmer closed his 4 eyes. How many ships have we lost this week? 14, sir. The rebels are not trying to win battles. They are trying to make conquest too expensive to continue. This was the human strategy. If you could not win, you made sure the enemy could not win either. You made victory cost more than defeat. The worst part was that it was working. Sir, the aide continued, we have received another request from the Coalition. They want to hire human mercenaries for defense contracts. Denied, Zikmmer said quickly. The last thing we need is more humans in this sector. But it was too late. Humans were already spreading across the galaxy. They served as bodyguards for Coalition diplomats. They trained local militias on frontier worlds. They hunted pirates in the outer systems. And everywhere they went, they brought their philosophy with them. Never quit, never surrender, never accept defeat. Lieutenant Colonel Janet Morris had become one of the most famous humans in the galaxy. She commanded a mixed unit of human and alien soldiers called the Terran Guard. Their job was to protect Coalition worlds from raiders and slavers. Today she was briefing a new group of recruits. Half were human Marines who had volunteered for extended service. The other half were aliens who wanted to learn human methods. Listen carefully, Janet said to the mixed group. You are not here to die for your cause. Any fool can die. You are here to make the enemy die for their cause. A young Corvani soldier raised his hand. Colonel Morris, my people believe that a good death is better than a bad life. Is this wrong? Janet considered the question. Not wrong, but incomplete. A good death is meaningful only if it accomplishes something. Dying just to die is waste. Dying to save others, dying to stop evil, dying to protect the innocent, that has meaning. But how do we know when dying is the right choice? Easy. Janet said with a grin. When you have exhausted every other option, when surrender means more people will suffer, when giving up means the bad guys win, that is when you fight until you cannot fight anymore. The Corvani soldier nodded slowly. And then we find a way to keep fighting. Now you are getting it. Back on Earth, Dr. Lisa Park was finishing her book about human combat psychology. She had interviewed hundreds of soldiers and studied battles across the galaxy. Her conclusion was simple but profound. Humans do not fight harder when they are winning, she wrote. They fight harder when they are losing. This makes them the most dangerous enemy and the most valuable ally in known space. Her book became required reading in every military academy in Coalition space. But more importantly, it changed how other species thought about conflict. The Ashkari, who had always avoided violence, started training special units that could fight like humans. The Threnody developed new weapons designed for last-stand battles. Even the peaceful Corvani began teaching their children that some things were worth dying for. Admiral Jake Martinez stood on the bridge of the new coalition flagship Defiant Hope. He was no longer just a diplomat. He was the commanding officer of the Coalition Defense Force, the first truly integrated military in galactic history. His fleet included ships from 20 different worlds, crewed by dozens of species. But they all shared one thing. They had learned from humans that quitting was not an option. Admiral, his communications officer said, we are receiving a distress call from the Epsilon sector. Scarn raiders are attacking a civilian convoy. Response time? Jake asked. 4 hours at maximum speed. The civilians will not last 4 hours. No, sir. But, sir, we are outnumbered 3-1. Standard doctrine says we should wait for reinforcements. Jake looked around his bridge. His crew included humans, Corvani, Ashkari, and Threnody. 6 months ago, they would have followed standard doctrine. They would have waited for backup. They would have made the smart, safe choice. But that was before they learned the human way. Set course for Epsilon sector, Jake ordered. Maximum speed. Sir, what about the odds? Jake smiled, remembering Tony Rodriguez and Danny Kim and all. The others who had died rather than quit. The odds do not matter. What matters is that innocent people need help, and we do not abandon people who need help. The ship turned toward danger, carrying its mixed crew into a battle they might not survive. But they were not afraid. They had learned the most important lesson humans could teach. Sometimes doing what is right is more important than staying alive. As the Coalition fleet jumped to hyperspace, Jake made one final log entry. Admiral's log. Admiral Jake Martinez commanding. Today we learned that humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy is not our technology or our knowledge. It is our refusal to accept that any fight is hopeless. We do not quit. We do not yield. We do not have an off switch. And now, neither does anyone else. The galaxy would never be the same.